Winter came early to the mining town, dry and sharp, scraping at the skin like grit blown off the plains. The hills around the settlement were the color of old bones, stripped bare by years of digging and disappointment. What little prosperity the mines had once promised was long gone, leaving behind men with hollow eyes and women who learned how to stretch a dollar until it nearly broke. Lena Parker had learned that lesson better than most. She stood at the small table by her window before dawn, her breath fogging the glass as she worked. A kettle sat over the stove, beeswax melting slow and careful, the way it had to if you wanted the candle to burn clean. She stirred in crushed lavender she'd dried herself, not for beauty, but because it reminded her of a time when life had smelled salter. On the other side of the room, her daughter slept curled beneath a thin blanket. Anna was 6 years old and light as a bird, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Lena paused to watch her, the spoon still in her hand. The letter from the school lay folded on the table behind her. Tuition due by the 1st of the year. If the payment didn't come, Anna wouldn't be returning. Lena closed her eyes for a moment and went back to work. She poured the wax into plain tin molds, setting the wick straight with fingers already rough from years of scrubbing floors and washing other people's clothes. These candles weren't pretty. No carved designs, no ribbons. But they burned longer than most, steady and patient. Lena had learned how to make them after her husband died, when patience was the only thing she had left. By mid-morning, she bundled the candles in cloth and walked into town with Anna holding her hand. The child skipped when she could, humming something she'd half learned at church. The Christmas market had been set up in the main square, though it felt thinner this year. Fewer tables, less laughter. The decorations looked tired evergreen boughs reused from years past, strings of bells dulled by dust. People browsed with their hands in their pockets, eyes measuring what they could afford to go without. Lena set her candles on a borrowed crate and waited. Hours passed. People stopped, picked one up, smelled it, set it back down. A woman murmured something to her husband about saving money. A man shook his head apologetically. No one bought a single candle. By late afternoon, the cold had worked its way into Lena's bones. Anna sat on the crate beside her, swinging her legs, growing quiet in that way children do, when they sense worry they don't yet understand. Lena began wrapping the candles back up. She told herself she would try again tomorrow, told herself something else would work out. That was when the man appeared. He came from the far edge of the square, walking alone. He was Apache. There was no mistaking it, and tall, with broad shoulders under a worn coat. His face was hard, carved by sun and restraint, and his eyes were dark and watchful. As he drew closer, Lena noticed his gait. One leg favored the other, the movement subtle but unmistakable. He stopped in front of her table. "How much?" he asked. Lena swallowed. "They're $1 each." He looked at the candles, then back at her. "I'll take all of them." The words landed so suddenly she thought she'd misunderstood. "All of them?" she repeated. He nodded once. No smile, no explanation. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. She gathered the bundle with shaking hands, counting quickly, afraid he might change his mind if she took too long. He handed over the money, without haggling. The bills folded neat, like he'd planned this. "Thank you," she said, the words coming out thinner than she meant them to. He didn't answer. He turned and walked away, his limp more noticeable now that she was watching for it. Lena stood there long after he disappeared into the crowd, the money warm in her palm. Anna looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "did we sell them?" Lena knelt and pulled her daughter close. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "We sold all of them." Yes, that night, their small house felt warmer than it had in weeks. Lena bought fresh bread, a bit of cheese, and a small tin of sweets she normally wouldn't have dared touch. Anna laughed when she saw it, really laughed, and the sound filled the room like something alive. They lit one of the leftover candles Lena had kept for herself. It burned steady on the table, the flame calm and sure. Later, when Anna was asleep again, Lena sat alone and counted the money once more. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it was enough for now. Enough to get through Christmas. Outside, the wind moved across the plains, carrying the smell of cold earth and old fires. Lena didn't know that somewhere beyond the edge of town, her candles would soon light something far more dangerous than hope. All she knew was that, for one quiet night, the dark had been pushed back just enough to breathe. The knock came just after sunrise. It was sharp and deliberate, the kind that carried authority with it, not the neighborly sort that waited to be answered. Lena was standing at the stove, pouring hot water over grounds for coffee, when the sound cut through the quiet house. She froze, hands still on the kettle. Another knock followed, louder. "Mama?" Anna's voice came from the bed behind her, already tight with worry. Lena set the kettle down and wiped her hands on her skirt. "Stay there, sweetheart," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "I'll be right back." When she opened the door, two men stood on the porch. Both wore long coats and iron badges that caught the pale morning light. The taller one had a gray mustache and eyes that never quite softened. The other rested a hand near his belt, where his revolver sat easy and familiar. "Lena Parker?" the taller man asked. "Yes." "You're under arrest." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated there between them, wrong and unfinished. "For what?" she asked. "Arson," he said. "Burning down the Wilson horse barn last night." Lena shook her head, once, then again harder. "That's not possible. I was here. I was with my daughter." The men exchanged a look that suggested they'd heard that before. Anna appeared behind her, barefoot, hair tangled from sleep. She clutched the hem of Lena's skirt. "Mama?" Lena dropped to her knees and pulled the child close, pressing her face into Anna's hair. "It's all right," she whispered, though her heart was already pounding hard enough to hurt. "It's just a mistake. I'll be back soon." The mustached man cleared his throat. "You need to come with us now." Lena stood slowly. Her hands shook as she reached for her coat. She turned to her neighbor's house next door, knocking once, then again until Mrs. Caldwell answered, her eyes widening at the sight of the badges. "Please," Lena said quickly. "Can you watch Anna for a little while? Just until I sort this out." Mrs. Caldwell nodded, pulling the child into her arms. Anna's cry broke loose then, sharp and panicked, and it followed Lena down the steps as the men led her away. The sound stayed with her all the way to the station. Inside, the air smelled of ink, cold coffee, and old paper. Lena was seated at a narrow table beneath a bare bulb that buzzed faintly. The mustached officer sat across from her, folding his hands. "You want to tell us why your candles were found at the fire?" he asked. Lena looked up. "My candles?" The other man stepped forward and set a bundle on the table. He unwrapped it slowly, like he was laying out something precious. What spilled out instead made Lena's breath catch. Half-burned candles, blackened wicks, tin bases warped by heat. She knew them instantly. The way the wax pooled, the faint scent of lavender still clinging to them. "That's impossible," she said hoarsely. "I sold those yesterday, every single one." "Who to?" the officer asked. "I don't know his name," Lena said. Her mind raced, searching for every detail. "He was Apache, tall, dark coat. He walked with a limp." The officer's mouth tightened. "That's so." "Yes. He bought all of them. I went straight home after. My daughter was with me the entire night." They let the silence stretch, watching her, measuring. Lena realized then that the room had already decided what it believed. The Wilson barn burned fast, the officer said. Dry hay, strong wind. Those candles of yours burn long and steady. Good for starting a fire. A strange guilt crept in, cold and unwelcome. She had always been proud of that. Now it turned against her. I didn't do this, she said again. You have to believe me. The officer leaned back in his chair. We'll see. By midday, word had spread. Lena could hear it in the voices outside the station, the low murmur that rose and fell like an animal breathing. Someone had set fire to a white man's property. Someone had used Apache hands to do it. And now a white widow was caught in the middle. A reporter from the county paper arrived before noon. He didn't ask Lena a single question. He spoke to the officers, scribbling quickly, nodding at the right moments. By afternoon, the tone had shifted. The officers weren't talking about Lena anymore. They were talking around her. The reservation's too close to town, one of them said. Always trouble when they come this way. Another nodded. This gives us reason to lean on them. Maybe clear a few things up. Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Late in the day, the mustached officer returned. You're coming with us, he said. We're going to the Apache settlement. You're going to identify the man who bought those candles. The ride was silent. The town fell away behind them, replaced by open land and scrub, the sky stretching wide and unforgiving. Lena watched it all pass, her hands folded tight in her lap. She thought of Anna, of her face crumpled in fear, of the school letters still sitting on the table at home. When they reached the settlement, the air changed. It wasn't louder or quieter, but it felt watched. People stopped what they were doing and looked up as the wagon rolled in. Their eyes followed Lena with open suspicion. She wanted to say she didn't belong there, that she hadn't chosen this. They were led to a house set slightly apart from the others. It was solid and plain, built with care. The mustached officer knocked once, then pushed the door open. A man stood inside. For a heartbeat, Lena's chest tightened. The shape of his face was familiar. The height. The presence. That's him, she said before she could stop herself. That's the man who bought my candles. The man stepped forward into the light and walked without a limp. He looked at her steadily, his expression calm but guarded. I've never seen you before, he said evenly. And I have never bought candles from you or from anyone. The officers straightened, already sensing opportunity. Lena's heart began to race. Your leg, she said desperately. You were injured. I saw you walk. The man met her eyes, something thoughtful passing through them. Then he turned and took 3 deliberate steps across the floor, smooth and even. I walk just fine, he said. The room went very quiet. Lena felt the ground shift beneath her, the certainty she'd been clinging to cracking open. For the first time since the knock that morning, real fear took hold not of punishment, but of being wrong. The man looked at her again, more closely now, not with anger, with recognition of a different kind. I think, he said slowly, you saw my brother. And in that moment, Lena understood that the fire, the candles, and her arrest were only the beginning of something far larger than she had ever intended to step into. The words settled over the room like dust after a collapse. You saw my brother. Lena stood there, hands clenched at her sides, trying to steady her breathing. The certainty she'd carried all morning, the one sought thing she thought she had had, split clean through. She searched the man's face again, this time more carefully. The shape of his cheekbones, the line of his jaw. Similar, close enough to fool a frightened woman, watching from behind a table in the cold. But not the same. The officers exchanged looks, their interest sharpening. The mustached one stepped forward. You telling us there's another seaman just like you, wandering around. The man nodded once. My twin. His name is Tomasai. He spoke calmly, but something dark moved behind his eyes. He walks with a limp. Has since we were boys. Lena swallowed. That's him, she said quietly. That's who I saw. The officer tapped his notebook with a finger. Where is he now? I don't know, the man replied. If I did, he wouldn't be wandering. Something in his tone made the younger officer snort. Convenient. The man didn't rise to it. He looked instead at Lena. Really looked this time. He took in the pallor of her face, the way her shoulders were drawn tight, the fear she was treading and failing to hide. You have a child, he said. Lena blinked, startled. Yes. A daughter? It wasn't a question. His gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. You wouldn't set a fire with her watching. The words were simple, not dramatic, but they landed with unexpected weight. Lena felt something loosen in her chest. I didn't, she said, her voice barely holding together. I swear I didn't. The mustached officer cleared his throat. That's not for you to decide, he said sharply to the man. This woman's still under suspicion. The man turned to face him fully now. Her name is Lena Parker, he said, and she hasn't done what you're accusing her of. You seem awful sure. I am. The officer bristled. And who exactly are you to be making claims? The man held his ground. My name is Laurent. I'm the appointed heir of this band. That did it. The air in the room shifted. Authority was a language the officers understood well enough. Lorraine continued, If my brother committed this crime, I will help you find him. But you will not use this woman as an excuse to threaten my people. Lena glanced at him, startled again. She hadn't expected defense, certainly, and not from here. The officers conferred in low voices. Finally, the mustached one turned back to Lena. You're not being charged today, he said, but don't think you're free and clear. This isn't over. I just want to go home, Lena said. My daughter. We'll release you, he interrupted, on one condition. You cooperate if we need you again. She nodded quickly. Of course. They left soon after, their departure marked by the same heavy stares that had greeted them. When the door closed behind the officers, silence rushed in to fill the space. Lena realized her legs were shaking. Laurent noticed. He stepped aside, pulling out a chair. Teeth, he said. Not unkindly. She hesitated, then did it. Her hands trembled in her lap. You didn't have to speak up for me, she said after a moment. I did, Lauren replied. Because I know what it looks like when someone's already been decided guilty. She looked at him then. They hate you, she said quietly. They fear what they don't bother to understand, he answered. It's easier that way. Lena nodded. She understood that too. I'm sorry, she said, for accusing you. You didn't accuse me, Laurent said. You told the truth as you knew it. He paused. My brother has been gone for years. After our father died, something in him broke. He believed the world owed him what it had already taken. And you? She asked before she could stop herself. I stayed, Lauren said. Someone had to. But they stood in silence again. Two people balanced on opposite edges of the same fire. Outside, the sun was lowering, painting the land in long shadows. Lauren glanced toward the door. You should get back to your daughter. Yes. Lena stood, then hesitated. They're not really going to look for him, are they? Lauren didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was measured. No. They'll wait and see if the trouble quiets down. And if it doesn't, then they'll come back, he said, with more force. The thought settled heavily between them. I can't let this follow me, Lena said, her fear sharpening into resolve. Not for my child. Lauren studied her. Then we find the truth before they decide it for us. You'd help me, she asked. I'd help myself, he said honestly. If my brother is responsible, I won't let him destroy more lives, yours included. Lena nodded slowly. I don't even know where to start. I do, Lauren said. He drinks. When he drinks, he talks. There are places between here and the ridge where men like him drift. A pause. It won't be easy. I didn't expect it to be. Lorraine opened the door for her. Outside, the settlement watched her go, curiosity and caution mixing in their eyes. She felt exposed, but she walked anyway, holding her head high. At the edge of the land, Lorraine stopped. I'll meet you at dawn, he said, by the old trail. She hesitated. Why are you really doing this? He considered her question carefully. Because if I don't, he said, the fire will keep spreading. And I'm tired of watching things burn. Lena nodded. She understood that too. As she walked back toward town, the weight of the day pressed down on her, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Not hope. Not yet. But the knowledge that she would not face what came next alone. And for the first time since the knock on her door that morning, that was enough to keep her standing. Dawn came pale and windless, the kind of morning that felt like the land itself was holding its breath. Lena left Anna with Mrs. Caldwell before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. She knelt in the doorway, smoothing her daughter's hair, committing the weight and warmth of her to memory. I'll be back, Lena said softly. I promise. Anna nodded, trying to be brave, though her small fingers yawned around Lena's sleeve. Don't be gone long, Mama. I won't. Lena kissed her forehead and stood before the ache in her chest could undo her. Lorraine was already waiting by the old trail, his horse standing quiet beside him. He nodded once when he saw her approach, as if he'd never doubted she would come. They set off without ceremony. The land opened up as they traveled, the town shrinking behind them until it felt like something imagined. The road they followed was barely more than a suggestion, a line worn into the earth by hooves and desperate feet. The wind carried the smell of dust and dry sage. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Lena was the first to break the silence. How long has your brother been gone? 3 years, Lauren answered. Longer in some ways. He didn't come back at all. Not to stay. Lorraine's jaw tightened. He passes through when he needs something. Food, money, trouble. Lena nodded. She understood men like that not from experience, but from watching the way grief hollowed people out, until only sharp edges remained. By mid-morning, they reached a low settlement of tents and half-built shacks near a dried riverbed. The place smelled of smoke and sour drink. Lorraine dismounted and led his horse by the reins. Stay close, he said, and let me speak first. Lena did as he asked. The men they questioned watched Lorraine carefully, their eyes flicking to Lena with open curiosity. A woman selling cheap whiskey recognized the description immediately. Limping Apache? She said. Yeah, he was here 2 nights ago. Drank till he couldn't see straight. Said something about making them notice. Which direction did he head? Lorraine asked. The woman jerked her chin west, toward the old grazing lands. As they rode on, the sky darkened with heavy clouds rolling in from the mountains. By the time the first rain fell, it came hard and cold, driven sideways by the wind. Lorraine guided them off the trail into a shallow rock overhang. They waited there as the storm passed over them, rain drumming against each phone, thunder echoing across the open land. Lena's coat was soaked through. Lorraine noticed and handed her his blanket without a word. You'll freeze, she protested weakly. I won't, he said. She took it, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief, but it sent a strange warmth through her that had nothing to do with the wool. When the storm eased, they built a small fire. Lorraine worked with practiced ease, shielding the flame until it caught. Lena watched him. The steady movements, the way he respected the fire, rather than rushing it. "You're not afraid of it," she said. "No," Lauren replied, "but I don't forget what it can do." The fire crackled between them. Lena found herself talking quietly at first, then more freely. She spoke of her husband, of the way he died suddenly, leaving behind unfinished promise. She spoke of Anna, of her fear that her daughter's world was already narrowing before it had properly begun. Lorraine listened without interrupting. "I stayed because someone had to," he said when she finished. "That's what I told myself. But some days it feels like I stayed because I didn't know how to leave." Lena looked at him then, really looked. "That's not weakness," she said. "That's responsibility." He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded once. They traveled again as the day waned. Following faint signs, Lorraine recognized scuffed earth, broken brush, the careless marks of someone who didn't expect to be followed. Near dusk, they found the remains of a camp. An empty bottle lay on its side. Ashes were scattered where a fire had burned too hot. Lorraine knelt, touching the ground. His face hardened. He was here. Lena's heart pounded. Recently? Last night. A sound reached them, then hooves. They turned as a rider appeared over the rise, a ranch hand by the look of him. He reined in when he saw them. "You folks headed toward the old Wilson place?" he asked. "Yes," Lauren said. The man spat. "Barn burned clean to the ground. Folks are riled up, saying it's only a matter of time before something worse happens." Lena felt the weight of that settle over her. "I need this to end," she said softly, "for my child." "It will," Lauren said, "one way or another." As night fell, they made camp again. The stars came out, sharp and cold, filling the sky in a way the town never allowed. Lena lay awake, wrapped in Lauren's blanket, listening to the sounds of the land. "You can turn back if you want," Lauren said quietly from across the fire. "I'll finish this." She sat up. "No," she said. "If I turn back now, I'll never stop running." He studied her, then nodded. "Then we finish it together." The fire burned low between them, steady and controlled, a small circle of light holding back the dark. Lena realized then that somewhere along the road, fear had given way to something else. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of it. And as sleep finally claimed her, she knew that whatever they found ahead would change them both, whether they were ready for it or not. They found him at dawn. The land had flattened into a stretch of broken grazing ground, dotted with mesquite and the remains of old fencing half buried in dust. The air smelled of ash long before they saw the smoke. Lorraine reined in his horse, his body going still in a way Lena recognized now, alert, braced. "There," he said quietly. A thin line of smoke rose from behind a cluster of rocks near the dry creek bed. What remained of a fire smoldered there, the coals disturbed as if someone had kicked at them in anger rather than care. An empty bottle lay on its side, catching the first weak light of morning. Lena's stomach tightened. "He's close." Lorraine nodded. He dismounted and motioned for her to stay back, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "I came this far." He studied her for a moment, then inclined his head. "Stay behind me." They approached on foot. The man sat slumped against a rock, his legs stretched awkwardly before him. His hair hung loose and unkempt, streaked with gray, though he couldn't have been much older than Lorraine. When he looked up, his eyes were bloodshot and sharp with resentment. "Well," he said hoarsely, "you finally came." Lorraine stopped a few feet away. "Thomasai." The name landed heavily between them. Thomasai laughed, a short, broken sound. "So you did notice I was gone?" "I noticed," Lauren said evenly. "I always noticed." Thomas's gaze shifted, landing on Lena. Recognition flickered there, slow, unmistakable. "That's her," he said. "The candle woman." Lena's breath caught. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you use them?" Thomas looked at her as if the question amused him. "Because they burned long," he said. "Because they were bright enough to be seen." "To be seen by who?" Loren asked. "By them." Thomas snapped, his voice easing. "By the ones who took everything and then pretended we should be grateful for what was left." Loren took a step closer. "You set fire to a man's barn." "I set fire to his property," Thomas corrected. "The land was ours first." Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You knew they would blame me," she said. "Or someone like me." Thomas's eyes flicked back to her. "I didn't care." The words hit harder than Lena expected. Not cruel, simply empty. "You could have killed someone," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "I didn't." "That doesn't make it right," Loren said sharply. Thomas's gaze hardened. "Easy for you to say. You stayed. You got their respect, their meetings, their careful words." "I stayed because someone had to hold what was left together," Loren said. "Not because I was chosen." Thomas laughed again, bitter this time. "You were always chosen." When silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken resentment, Loren's voice softened. "You don't have to do this anymore." "Yes, I do," Thomas snapped. "If I stop being angry, then everything that was taken stays taken." Lena understood then. Not the justification, but the wound. Grief left untended didn't heal. It rotted. Footsteps sounded behind them. Lorraine stiffened, turning just as two riders crested the Rise sheriff's men, drawn by rumor and smoke. Thomas saw them too. His expression twisted. "So that's it," he said. "You bring them here to finish it." "I brought myself," Loren replied. They followed. The deputies dismounted, hands already near their weapons. "There he is," one said. "The cripple." Lena stepped forward before she could stop herself. "He's the one," she said clearly. "He bought my candles. He used them. I had nothing to do with the fire." The men barely looked at her. Loren did. The deputies moved in quickly, rough hands grabbing Thomas's arms. He didn't resist. As they hauled him up, his gaze met Loren's one last time. "You really believe this will change anything?" Thomas asked. "No," Loren said quietly, "but it will stop this." Thomas looked past him then, to Lena. Something like regret flickered across his face, but it vanished just as quickly. The deputies rode off with him, dust rising in their wake. The land fell silent again, as if it had been holding its breath. Lena sagged, the tension draining from her all at once. Loren caught her elbow, steadying her. "It's over," he said. She nodded, though her chest felt strangely hollow. "I thought I'd feel relieved." "You will," Loren said, "later." They returned to town together. True to form, the sheriff cleared Lena's name with little ceremony. No apology was offered, no public acknowledgement made. The paper printed a brief correction, buried low on the page. By afternoon, the story had already begun to fade. Lena stood outside the station, the winter sun pale against the skiffle. "I don't want to stay here," she said quietly. "Not after this." Loren nodded. "You don't have to." That evening, Lena gathered Anna into her arms, holding her longer than usual. "We're going somewhere else for a while," she said. "Together?" Anna asked. "Yes," Lena said, "together." When Lena looked up, Loren was standing a few steps away, waiting, not pressing, not assuming. "Come," he said. "There's room where I am." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. As they left the town behind, the last light of day stretched across the land. pale and steady. Lena thought of the candles she had made, how they had burned bright enough to start a fire and bright enough to reveal the truth. Some light, she realized, didn't ask permission. It simply showed what had been there all along. The first snow came the night they arrived. It fell light and dry, barely clinging to the ground, softening the hard lines of the land without trying to change it. Lena watched it from the doorway of the small house Lorraine had prepared at the edge of the Apache settlement. It wasn't large, but it was solid, thick walls, a low roof built to hold warmth, and a hearth that still smelled faintly of fresh stone. Anna pressed her nose to the window, leaving a foggy print on the glass. "Mama," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "It's snowing." Lena smiled, a real one this time. "It is." The settlement received them quietly. No celebration, no open hostility either. Just watchful eyes and careful distance. Lena understood that kind of caution. She had lived her whole life inside it. Lorraine had made no speeches, issued no explanations. He had simply said they would stay, and that had been enough. The first days were the hardest. Lena felt every glance, every pause in conversation when she passed. She kept her head down, helped where she could, and spoke only when spoken to. Anna, unburdened by history, adapted more quickly. Children always did. She followed the other children as they ran between houses, her laughter cutting through the reserve that held the adults back. At night, when the fire burned low, Lena sat alone and wondered if she had made the right choice. The town had been cruel, but it had been familiar. This place was neither. Loren never pressed her. He came by each evening to check that the firewood was stacked and the door secured. He stayed only a few minutes, respectful of the space between them. One evening, Lena finally spoke. "You don't have to keep watching over us." Loren met her gaze. "I know. But you do anyway." "Yes," she nodded. She understood that too. When Anna began attending lessons with the other children, the tension eased a little. Education here was different, stories spoken aloud, lessons taught through work and observation. But Lena saw the same spark of curiosity in her daughter's eyes, the same hunger to learn. That mattered more than the shape the schooling took. As winter deepened, Lena returned to making candles. Not for sale. She worked slowly, carefully, pouring wax into molds she had fashioned herself. She blended in lavender and sage, sometimes cedar if she could find it. The candles burned clean and steady, just as they always had. On the longest night of winter, she carried them outside one by one and placed them around the edge of the settlement. No announcement, no ceremony. Loren watched from a distance. When she finished, she stood back, hands aching from the cold. The candles flickered in the snow, their light soft but persistent, casting long shadows across the ground. Loren joined her then. "Why here?" he asked. "Because this is where I am," Lena replied, "and because light shouldn't belong to anyone." He nodded slowly. "In our way, we keep fire alive so memory doesn't die." Lena looked at him. "Then maybe that's what I'm doing." They stood together in silence, the warmth of the candles pushing back the dark. It wasn't grand. It didn't erase what had been done. But it was enough. In the weeks that followed, the settlement began to change. Small gestures at first. A woman left a basket of dried corn by Lena's door. An older man offered to fix a loose hinge. No words accompanied these acts, but they didn't need to. Trust, Lena realized, wasn't declared. It was practiced. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Anna fell asleep between them, her head resting against Loren's arm. Lena started to move her, but Loren shook his head slightly. "Let her be," he said. Lena watched the rise and fall of her daughter's chest. "She feels safe here." "So do you," Loren said. She didn't deny it. "I was always afraid," Lena admitted quietly. That if I stopped struggling, everything would fall apart. And now? And now I know there are different ways to stand. Lorraine studied the fire. Where I come from, he said, choosing someone means choosing their burdens too. Lena met his gaze. I don't expect you to carry mine. I know, he said. That's why I'm willing to. Yet the words settled between them, heavy and sure. There was no urgency in what followed, no promise demanded, only a shared understanding that whatever grew here would grow slowly, rooted deep. Outside, the wind moved through the land, carrying the faint scent of sage and melting snow. Later that night, Lena lit one final candle and set it on the hearth. It burned quietly, its flame steady and unafraid. Loran watched it for a long moment. Then he said almost to himself, some candles don't need a price. Lena smiled. They just need the right place to be lit. The flame held wavering, as the night stretched on around them, simple, imperfect, and bright enough to keep the darkness at bay.